Laws enacted promote free competition by prohibiting agreements to limit competition and real property business. For example, setting a standard commission for all brokers to charge would be a violation and a big no-no here. Is this antitrust laws, equal opportunity laws, right to practice laws, or fair housing laws? What do you guys think tonight? Does this sound like price fixing? Price fixing is bad. So I'll give everybody a chance to kind of read through that and think about it. And you guys put in the chat, what do you guys think is the right answer for this one? Antitrust laws. Yes, for sure. Remember, we have the Sherman Antitrust Laws. That's a big one. So there are 4 things that we need to remember for Sherman Antitrust. Number 1 is this one, price fixing, right? Which would be a big no-no. That's where I get together with my competition and say, hey, let's all charge 6% or whatever the case may be. That would be against antitrust when I'm colluding with my fellow brokers in town to charge the same price. Another one would be group boycotting. That's another example of a violation of Sherman Antitrust. So group boycotting is like if I said, oh, I'm upset with Carolyn, so I'm going to make it so that she can't show any of our listings. And what do you guys think? You want to join me on this? And I get together with other brokers and try to shut her business down. That would be bad. That would be group boycotting. What's another one? You guys remember any more? What about market allocation? Tie-in arrangement. Good one, Sunita. Let's do tie-in arrangement. Sunita brought up the next one. That's tie-in arrangement. That's where, like, if I tell you, oh, I own a title company and I own a real estate company and I own a brokerage and all this stuff. And if you want to do business with me over here, you got to buy this from me over here. Like I'm making you buy more than one product from me. That would be against antitrust. That's called a tie-in arrangement, or some people call it a tying arrangement. That doesn't mean that I can't own multiple companies that are kind of related like that. I just can't force you to use them. Okay. That's the big thing. I just can't force you to use them. Okay. Was the one we didn't do. Market allocation. So like if Amaryllis lives in the north part of town and I live in the south part of town and we're competing brokers and we're in a small town and I say, listen, Amaryllis, I don't want to compete with you anymore. Why should we even advertise? Why should we compete at all? Let's just make it so if anybody calls about the south side of town, then I'll take them because that's where I live. And if anybody calls me about the north side of town, I'm going to send them to you and vice versa, right? And we will just shut down the competition. So remember, the whole thing behind Sherman Antitrust Laws is that we're trying to make it so that companies don't not have to compete with each other, right? We want to have fair and equal competition so that people aren't stuffed into do this or else kind of thing. Where a real estate broker mixes their personal funds with those of a client, and this is illegal. Is this escheat, conversion, commingling, or quiet title action? What do you guys think? Escheat, conversion, commingling, or quiet title action? Yes, commingling. We're mixing money together. We're commingling. We're mixing all of our money together. My personal money with my trust fund money that I'm holding on behalf of others. Or it could be like, for example, if I took my money and put it in my trust account, that would be a great example of commingling. It's completely illegal. Like if I'm trying to hide a commission check that I got and I said, oh, I'll just stick it over here in the trust escrow account. Totally can't do that, right? So then next, a clause in a listing which states that if a property is sold during a specific period of time after the expiration of the listing to a buyer procured by the broker, a commission shall be owed. Is this acceleration clause, assumption clause, safety clause, or alienation clause? Yeah, this is called it's called the safety clause. And it's also sometimes called the broker protection clause. Yeah, either of those, safety clause or broker protection clause. Same thing. Let's say that I showed a house to you. And while I was in the bathroom, it was my listing, right? And it's getting ready to expire in a week. And while I'm in the bathroom, the seller pulls you aside and says, hey, wait a week until this expires and come back and then we'll cut Marie out of this deal. This is to kind of keep you seller from doing this, right? Because we don't want the seller stealing our buyers that we introduced the property. If there was a safety clause or a broker protection clause, it basically says that if I introduced the buyer to the house and then they bought it a certain amount of time after the listing expires, if it didn't sell, then you would still owe me a commission. Yes, estoppel, the doctrine of estoppel. So Sanita asked about the doctrine of estoppel. I think maybe did we do that this morning? I can't remember. I feel like maybe we talked about it. So if you guys remember, I think it was this morning. But here's how it goes. The doctrine of estoppel says that if I say something, if I tell you something and you rely on it, I can't backpedal and be like, oh, I didn't mean that. Never mind. I'm not responsible for that, right? It's to keep me from going back on my word and to try to kind of finagle out of something that I've told you. Yeah, to go back on your word. Exactly. That's doctrine of estoppel. What about acceleration clause? When would the bank, I know it's not the answer to this one, but since it's on the screen here, let's talk about it. When would the bank do an acceleration clause? What might make that happen? What might make it happen that we accelerate it? Yeah, when the buyer defaults is a great example, right? So acceleration clauses, let's say I have 20 more years left to pay on this loan. It's a 30-year loan. I paid for 10 years and I've got 20 more years to pay. But all of a sudden I just stop paying and I don't make my payments. And the bank says, no, that's not going to work, right? And so they call the whole loan due at once. They enact that acceleration clause and they call the rest of that loan due now. Now, obviously, they don't think that I have the rest of the money just hidden under my mattress, or else I'd probably be paying them in the first place, right? So why do they accelerate it then if they don't think I have the money? Why would they call it all due? Seems kind of illogical until you think about it a little bit. Yeah, to foreclose on you, Miriam. Very good. So basically, if they're going to foreclose on you, they don't want to keep coming back and suing you and suing you and suing you for every time you get behind. And then they got to file another. You're just like, the heck with this. Let's be done with it. We're going to call it all due, sue for foreclosure, get this house sold, and move on down the road. So that's the acceleration clause. All right, next question. Concurrent ownership sharing the unities of time, title, interest, and possession. If we have time, title, interest, and possession, remember PIT, or I think Joe says T-tip. I'm not sure. I always remember PIT, P-I-T-T. What does that have to do with? Is that joint tenancy, dual estate, ownership and severalty, or tenancy in common? We have possession. Remember, we have to start at the same time. We have to be on the same title. We have to have equal interest, and we each get equal possession. Yes, that is most definitely joint tenancy. And I always tell people, think of it like this. In joint tenancy, I'm joined with you. Like if Tyrone and I were to become joint tenants, say he's my brother and I decide to buy this house with him as a joint tenant. So what do we know about that? So like basically remember that we're very closely joined here. We have all these things. We have the right of survivorship too, right? If I were to pass away, Tyrone would automatically get my part. And if Tyrone were to pass away, I would automatically get his. We're very, very much tied together and joined. Versus tenancy in common, it's like, well, we have something in common. It's the building, it's the house, it's the property that we own together. And that's important, but it's not quite as tight as joint tenancy, right? To have something in common is not the same as being joined. So in tenancy in common, I can leave my property portion to my heirs, right? I can leave it to my heirs in that situation. I don't have to be equal with Tyrone if we were tenants in common. Miriam asked if I could go over the alienation clause. Yeah, totally. So alienation clause is another clause in our mortgage loans that basically says that if I transfer the deed to someone else without paying off the loan first, that the bank can say, hey, look, you've alienated us from this collateral, and they can call the whole loan due too. So they're also accelerating the loan, just like in the acceleration clause, just for a very specific reason. All right. Yeah, good point. Sanita said it's the same as the due on sale clause, right? So due on sale clause and the alienation clause are the same thing. Just depends on what term we use, but they do mean the same thing. So where someone has the right to use or enter someone else's land for a special purpose and within certain limits, is this easement, fixture, trade fixture, or lien? Easement, fixture, trade fixture, or lien. So if I have the right to go onto your property, of course, that's our easement. But now tell me, you guys, what does it mean if somebody has a lien? If someone has a lien against my property, what does that mean? Yeah, they owe money. I owe somebody money. They put a lien on my house. I owe them money. What might be reasons I would owe them money? A mortgage. could be a really good reason I would owe them money. Another reason that they might put a lien on my property is a mechanic's lien. Yes, if tax lien for property taxes, for sure. Shanna says does a roof on my house and I don't pay her for the work, she can come after me and put a mechanic's lien on my house for sure. Yes, very good, very good. All right, let's see what else can we say here. What about a trade fixture? Is a trade fixture and a fixture the same thing? Is there a difference? And yes, there's a difference, right? A trade fixture would be something I would use in the course of my business, like a pizza oven or a salon chair, something like that, where I'm in rented space and I've brought this thing in to help me with my business that I need. I've affixed it temporarily while I'm renting that commercial space. And then when I move on, I got to clean up my mess, make sure I don't do any damage taking it with me, but I'm allowed to take it with me. Yeah, dentist chair, exactly. Versus a traditional fixture would stay with the property even when the person moved on. Good job, guys. You guys are smart tonight on these. A legal document transferring real property is called is it will, waiver, deed, or title? What's the document called? Will, waiver, deed, or title? And everybody got that one right straight out of the gate that it's deed. But a lot of times I have people be like, well, what's the difference between deed and title? And a lot of times we use those terms interchangeably, and that's okay. But I always tell people to think of like the deed is the physical paper and the title is the idea and the concepts that I own it, if that helps. I don't know if that helps or not, but like if I say, oh, I'm giving Chelsea title to my house, but I would hand her the deed, right? And so if I was going to transfer title from me to Chelsea, I would have to sign the deed and deliver it to Chelsea. And then what has to happen? Not just that I deliver it to Chelsea, but what does she have to do for that title to transfer? Besides my delivery, then what's Chelsea got to do? She has to accept it, right? Chelsea has to accept the deed. Very good. Antoinette got it. Jane got it. Yes, yes. So the seller signs it. They hand it over and deliver it to the grantor, delivers it to the grantee, and then they have to accept it. So when that happens, that's when things change hands from one person to the next. So, where a landowner tries to show that his land should not have to comply with zoning laws for some special reason, is this downzoning, cheat, subordination, or variance? What do you guys think? So you all got that one right away, but okay, so we know it's variance, but give me an example of why I might be granted a variance. What do you guys think? Like, pretend right now that you needed some way to get out of the rules to get a variance. What would you do? Like, what would you ask for? Well, this is a little different than grandfathered in. Oh, I'm glad we talked about this because a variance is not the same as a non-conforming use. In a non-conforming use, we've been using it a certain way all this time, right? Like for the barbershop that started out that they built when my family built the barbershop 60 years ago, the area was zoned commercial. It was cool for what I was doing. And then they changed the rules around me and they made it residential, but they will let me keep having my barbershop because it's grandfathered in or it's a non-conforming use. But a variance is what I'm asking in advance to make a change to my property or to make a change to the rules or to work around the rules. For example, let's say that I bought a building lot like 60 years ago, and I don't know why. I just never got around to building on it. And it's like my life dream. Maybe 60 years is too long. Let's say 20. And when I first bought my building lot, the setback requirements, remember the distance I have to be from my neighbors, setback requirements? Maybe they were such a way at first that I could easily build my house on that land. But then they came along and they changed them. And they said, now we need you to be a little bit further away from your neighbor. Well, now my lot is too narrow to build my house on. I've got to just make this little narrow, skinny house. And so because of that, I might go to the board at zoning board and ask them and say, like, look, can I have a variance? Because now this property is kind of useless unless you guys let me kind of bend the rules a little bit. And they might say, oh, that makes sense because they don't want to put an undue hardship on you. All right, next question. A method of obtaining ownership rights by the open, notorious, exclusive, and hostile possession of private real property for a statutory period, which varies from state to state. It could be from anywhere from 5 years to 30 years, depending on my state. Is this accession, accretion, prescription, or adverse possession? Remember here, Unlike in the situation where I have an easement by prescription, where I'm granted an easement because I've been using the property for a long time, here they're actually giving me ownership, and this is called adverse possession. Now, I want to stop and tell people that in real life, we don't just go around snatching up. Like, I can't just wait till Monica goes on vacation in Florida, move in her house, and then just sit there for 30 years and say, tough, Monica, too bad. I'm keeping this thing, right? This is where the person who owns the property has well and truly abandoned it. Okay. So what I mean is, like, if at any point I moved in Monica's house that I thought was abandoned and she comes along and says, hey, Maria, get the heck out of here. At that point, she's told me to leave, then now I can't claim adverse possession. It's when I'm doing it out in the open. I'm doing it for years and years. I'm paying the taxes. I'm taking care of the place like I own it. And nobody comes by and tells me to leave. After so long, the government says, well, it's better than letting this property just sit here and rot and nobody taking care of it. So we'll just go ahead and give it to them. Yeah, the Wild West, Tyrone. Yeah, exactly. So where changes in zoning convert commercially zoned areas into residentially zoned areas. So where changes in zoning convert commercially zoned areas into residentially zoned areas. Is this variance, subordination, escheat, or downzoning? Variance, subordination, escheat, or downzoning. And this is downzoning. When I'm taking a really densely used property, like with lots of people in it, and I'm kind of making it less so, right? I'm changing it into residential. And then that would be downzoning. Yeah, it's kind of like what it sounds like. I'm zoning downward. I'm making it less dense. Exactly. So what about escheat? What does that mean? When's an example about that? It's when I die without a will. And like Carolyn said, I also have no heirs. Like, the state looks around and they're like, normally if I die intestate or without a will, they would look to the laws of descent and say, who is Maria's closest relatives? That's who we're going to give her stuff to. But what if I have nobody? It's really sad. And they're like, oh, what should we do? So usually the government will take our stuff eventually and they will take it through escheat. Yeah. Yeah. So if I die without a will, remember it's intestate. If I die with a will, it's called testate. Now, bonus points. What do you guys call it? What do we call it? If I say that I had a will and I named Erla my executor of my will, right? So I wrote a will. I said Erla is my friend. I'm going to put her in charge of getting rid of my stuff, giving my stuff out to my heirs or whatever. But what if I die without a will, intestate, and the court appoints somebody to distribute my things? What do we call that? Not executor, but what's that? Well, it's probate court. Right, Emma. Yes. But what's the person called that's going to get my stuff out to my cousin or my brother or whoever? And and that's the administrator, you guys. That person's called the administrator. So if you hear that somebody had an administrator of their will, very good. That means that they died without a will. They died intestate. All right. So our next question is, if something is said to run with the land, is that attachments, encumbrances, liens, or appurtenances? If it runs with the land, attachments, encumbrances, liens, or appurtenances? Yeah, everybody's like, we're kind of going back. Now, remember, run with the land like an easement. Don't let this one fool you guys. This is appurtenances, right? We beat you to death with this word. I don't know why they love this word on the exam. Like, I feel like, or on the practice questions, I feel like this is like one of our frequently used words that we use in our exam prep and things like that, which normally I'm never walking around life going, oh, appurtenances, right? But if something runs with the land, it's appurtenant to the land, right? It sticks with it, stays with it no matter what. And so, for example, an easement, if I gave William an easement to use my driveway and we recorded the easement and then I sold the house to Melina, now Melina has to let William use the driveway, right? Because that appurtenant easement runs with the property. Now I'd have to tell Melina that William's going to be driving up and down the driveway, right? I can't hide it from her, but that's how it would work. Let's see, what else can we say on here? Oh, encumbrances. So while it's up here, let's talk about it. Encumbrances. What are some examples? So if we're going to be talking about encumbrances, what do you guys think are encumbrances? Yes, Sarah. So if I'm on your property line, right? If I'm on your property line, that's an encroachment. Like I've built my barn or my fence or whatever on your property. That's a definite encroachment. It's something that's keeping me from doing what I want to do with the property. That's one form of encumbrance. Somebody said liens are another form of encumbrance. I owe somebody money. I can't sell the property and just keep all the money for myself. That's another encumbrance. Very good, you guys. You guys did great on that one. All right, next question. A comprehensive plan to allow a city to grow in an orderly and sound manner. Is this eminent domain, master plan, zoning, or all-inclusive plan? If we want to have everything grow in an orderly and sound way, eminent domain, master plan, zoning, or all-inclusive plan? All right. Yes, this is our master plan. Most cities try to have a good master plan. They want to have everything laid out so that we can all gel together, right? We can all live in the same place happily so we don't have a bar next to a school, next to a church, next to a house, next to a church, next to a house. It's going to be clumped together so that everybody can use the land for what they need to use it for in the city or town, but hopefully without infringing on the rights of other people. And so that's our master plan. Okay. So you guys tell me real quickly, I know that's not the answer to this one, but when we think of zoning, if you think of zoning, what can you tell me about zoning? Let's think of these two terms together and you tell me what comes to mind. If I say zoning and building permits, what pops into your head? Oh, I made balloons. Sorry, guys. I was using my fingers and I made the balloons go off. Police power. Very good, Emma. Police power. Lots of people. Oh, we're getting it. Antoinette, Evelyn. Yes, everybody saw that one. The police power for sure. That's the word I was looking for, although the other answers were good too. Police power is when the government is telling me what I can or cannot do with my land. They're cramping my style, telling me how I can use private property. And they're saying, nope, nope, nope. You got to do this. You got to do that. That sort of thing. Yeah, for sure. All right, our next question. A way of estimating the value of a property by looking at sales of comparable properties, the cost replacement approach, the market data or sales comparison approach, the income approach, or the gross rent multiplier. The market data or sales comparison approach is the one where we're using comparable properties. When would we use this? We would use it a lot of times on residential single family houses. Another time we use market data or sales comparison approach is vacant land. Now, depending on what your area is like, the appraiser might have to go out a wider area to find comps for vacant lots, right? Maybe not a whole lot of vacant land has sold recently that's comparable. But the thing to remember is that they would make adjustments. What about the income approach? What would I use the income or the income cap approach for? What kind of property is popular to use for that? And Antoinette did a good one there. Did you guys see what she said? The cost approach is used for churches, schools, special use properties. Exactly. The income approach is used for things like apartment buildings, strip malls, things where I have a lot of income. Like the focus of why I bought that property was to produce income, right? The focus why I bought that property was to produce income. So that's why the income approach formula is used. Now, you guys tell me, who remembers? This is kind of a tricky question I'm getting ready to ask you. Who remembers the formula for the income cap approach or the income approach? What's the formula? Remember, that's the one where it's the net operating. There we go, Antoinette got it. Net operating income divided by cap rate equals value. Yes, very good. So I would get the net operating income, and then I would divide it by the cap rate. The cap rate or capitalization rate is the return on the investment, right? And that gives me the value. Great job. You guys did great tonight.